Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. In this episode, part 1 of 2, we talk with Rhonda Roos, author of The Deliberate and Courageous Principle, 10 Leadership Actions and Skills to Create High-Achieving Schools. As a new principal or vice principal, you'll want to listen in to some terrific stories and practical tips like, first, build trust with your staff and community by following through on what you say. If you say it, do it. And set clear expectations for yourself and for your staff.
This podcast is brought to you by the word deliberate, from the Latin which means to weigh or consider carefully. Originally, this was about weighing options carefully, which has evolved into the modern meanings related to careful consideration and intentional action, something important for every new principal or vice principal.
At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you can find some great ideas on leading from a restorative relational perspective. And if you enjoy this episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify or YouTube. Now, let's head over to this discussion with Shelley, Steve, and me, Stan.
There were the assistant principal years and then the years of being a principal at one school for a decade. It was a middle school. I had 5, 6, 7, and 8. 1,000 children. Okay, they're in that particular middle school. The entire time I was there, I questioned myself inwardly. Am I doing the right work? Is this the right work I'm supposed to be doing? Like other schools who have high poverty and who have, high ethnicity and they're getting high results. Is this what they're doing? Right? Just that self-doubt, always wondering. I thought it was right, but I wasn't ever really sure. And later in life for me, at about 50, I went back to work on my doctorate work. And I asked them if I could do qualitative research on visiting schools in Indiana. So going to interview them and do qualitative research. Oh, it was so interesting for me. And I found that, yes, we were doing the right work, but these schools were doing it at an even deeper level, making things less complex, more simple, very clear with their teachers. Here's what expected of you. We're going to take everything off your plate and try to support you in how are kids learning in your classroom.
Can you give us an example of that? Of what, just one thing they would have made simple?
I think where I would start would be this, Shelley, was, okay, the state has given us so many standards. We're going to break those down. And by quarter, we're really going to hone in our 5 or 6 essential learning targets. These are the biggies, right? These are the biggies. So our classroom observations and all of that part were revolving around these. So we gave all of our PD was aligned to helping teachers learn how to teach these even better. Then we did a little quarterly teacher written assessment, CFA, right? To go, okay, we taught it the best we know how. Did kids happen to get any of it? Right? How well did we do? And they were very simple little common formative assessments, 5 questions. We're hoping they get 4 out of the 5 right. And if they didn't, no one's in trouble. We expected them to do well and to achieve highly. Shelley, how do I say this? We had dropped so much on teachers. I feel like, at least in the States, there's just so much on them. This reading program and that reading program, and then we're going to do this for a math reading program with 8 million computer programs to use during tier 2. All of these, that's what we just wiped the slate clean. No, we're going to focus on these targets. It's not all you teach, but it's the main things that we're going to follow up and see how well kids did. And we met all kids. If you are a special education student, if you happen to be one of our EL students, great. That's what I'm saying when I say to really give clarity to teachers and to support them. It is hard. I think teaching is the most critical, most difficult role in the school. It's the teaching. That's the hard part. And the rest of us just revolve around that orbit of helping the teachers help students learn to their highest ability.
And your story reminded it's almost identical to my story in Ontario, where we have thousands of learning outcomes, and teachers say, how can we possibly teach them all? So we did the same thing. We said, let's forget the specifics. Let's look at the overalls. There's only 5 overalls. We don't have to worry about the 123 specific. But one of the challenges to do that as a principal in your school, and my colleagues did the same, is that we have to then be able to, I'll be nice about this, say, filter out some of the pressure from above to say, why aren't you doing all these other things? What I found with a lot of new administrators is because they're very young, they're getting promoted very quickly now, from the classroom to VP to principal within like 2 years. They don't have that experience, or they don't even have the, what would we call it, the courage to take that role on. So what would be your comment on that, or your advice to those new people jumping into that?
Okay, Steve, first of all, it just is like honey pouring over my heart to hear you use the word courage, because we put that in the title of my book, to be a deliberate and courageous principal, because it takes courage to do this kind of work. So, first of all, I just think we're not fair to teachers, and bravo for an administrator who will say, I've got you. No matter what district says, I've got you, because we know that in the end, if we've given special attention to these learning targets and we really help support students and teachers in learning these things that are required of us to learn, you're going to get results from that. You will get results and some achievement gains, and then districts always pretty happy with that, right? So it's like covering and supporting these teachers while you focus them in on those certain learning targets to start with. Here's my second thought. We know that a school is about learning. That's why we exist, so that students can achieve at the highest level possibles for them, right? But what I find, what I see with schools is that we're busy doing everything else but putting our priority on learning. And I just call those systems. I can remember all 3 of you, I'm sure, had an experience like this. In my first year, I had a list of 79 things. And at the end of first semester, I remember thinking, I even wrote a letter to my superintendent letting him know I was going to resign, because I thought, you've set me up for something impossible. So here's what some of those 79 things were: back to school night, registration, okay, special ed IEPs, and writing meaningful goals. Ours were not, right? Then you just got the way the lunchroom goes. How do we line up for assemblies? Some are small, little systems, and some are bigger ones, right? But all of them, middle school transition in, transitioning out to the high school. How do we do all these things, right? If we're not careful, that's all we do, because you can stay plenty busy just working on your 79 systems. So what we do is we go, we're going to knock these out. Some of them are made, right? They're not very good, but some of the systems are already in place. Let's start there, and let's be deliberate and choose ones along with my leadership team, because a principal can't do it all by herself, right? So it's a twofold piece. We're going to get in here on the academics and what kids are going to be learning. And at the same time, we're going to build these systems around them so that our school is running efficiently. I tell principals, in 2.5 years, you can have all 79 or however many they come up with, you can have them built. It's the difference in really taking action as a principal or just being busy. And I hate to say that my experience shows me that most principals in my experience, are just busy. Good people killing themselves, working so hard on these little minor systems instead of the real work.
I think all learning takes place in the context of relationships with others, relationships with ourself, relationships with our environment. And so that if we were to describe what you're talking about, we would talk a lot about relationships and relational learning and relationships in school. Those systems that you're talking about are all relational systems as well.
You have to have the mechanics of the steps, but you have to have the people who want to work with you, want to incorporate those systems, want to help improve them. Mm-hmm.
Now, Shelley, I like the way you're saying that, because the first part of the book are those 5 actions. And your term you just used were, it's the mechanics. It's the 5 actions. And then you come over here, and I think you said, then it's the people and the relationships they're building. And those are the skills. So I'll just say this. It sounds a little ugly, but I'm going to say it anyway. Throughout my career as an English teacher, guidance counselor, all those things that I love, we get to work for many people, right? And my experience tells me this: they were either really competent at knowing what to do, right? Or they were really competent at just being good people and building relationships with everybody. And you loved them and you wanted to do what they say. But if they were the good relationships people, sometimes they didn't know the right work we should be doing. And these people over here, and I'll be honest, it was only really one time I hit somebody that really knew the right work and that all about learning, but didn't really have the skills to get along with people. So people didn't want to do what was asked because we didn't like him, right?
Right.
So the whole book is, it takes both sides. And the first skill is, do you build relationships with people, principals, and really talking with them about that? Do you this is from the work of Pat Lencioni. They'll say, number 1, do you know your people, principal? Do you know them? Like a little bit about their life and care about their family and their children, and their mother is ill. Do you know them? And then have you given them the decency to really clarify the work, which is what we just talked about, right? And then do you celebrate with each one of them? I had a gentleman once I was presenting. Oh, we got so mad on that. And he said, you mean you want us to talk to every adult in the building and set a goal with them and celebrate when? And that was, I said, yes. And he
Yeah.
said, well, you expect too much.
Yeah. And by the end of the week, please.
Yeah. So it's that whole, and I don't know why. And just from I've listened to pieces of your all's podcast and looking at the whole restorative piece, which is such beautiful work. I think I used to think that just came naturally to people. And I've learned, sadly enough, but none of the true work gets done unless people know we care about them. Oh, Stan, that's what we talked about on attendance. That's one system, attendance, right? And in Indiana, I'm sure it's through all the states, there's a big, we're bashing on school districts. Get your kids back to school since COVID, right? They left and really haven't come back fully, right? So we're doing all the things that have no meaning. Pizza party, if everybody gets here,
Yeah.
you know, for the pizza, oh, we'll get t-shirts for that class. If everybody, but Herman ain't coming. He's not coming. Nobody cares about Herman. Nobody's checking on Herman or Herman's family to know that his grandma died or his auntie. La la. So Stan and I got to spend some time on that system. We make that system about people. And you look at the 15 kids in the building who need an individual or two around them to get to know their family. No wonder they're not coming to school. I don't know how I rambled right off down that road, but anyway.
It's a great road. It's a great road.
Oh,
Hey, give us.
We're riding with you there.
Oh.
Hey, we'll ramble along with you.
Yeah,
Don't you
yeah.
worry.
We're
Yeah.
restraining ourselves right now.
That's right.
Going with that.
Man, I'm just on the edge of my seat.
This is Steve being restrained as he
Yeah.
talks
Oh,
through
my
everybody
goodness.
else.
No,
Oh my
so
goodness.
the whole idea of, and you talk about systems and the 79 things or however many come up, and that's usually just the first week. Those 79 those systems all need to be looked after. You can't ignore them because they exist. It's how you deal with them. And ultimately, what I found over time, as I got to build the relationships with the people in my school, with my caretakers and all those other people that look
Yes.
after, you can let some of that stuff go and say, look, I trust you. You guys are in charge of that thing. Just let me know if you need anything. So a lot of those systems are taken care of by other people once you get to know them. What I found is a lot of the principals and administrators who struggled a lot were tied up in micromanaging all those systems and looking after them all. They spent their whole day sitting in their desk at their office, never getting out to meet kids and talk to staff because they said, I'm too busy. I got all these things to look after, when really you don't need to look after them. You can look after those. If you really want to micromanage it, do it at 3:30. But when the kids are at school, that's when you should be in the halls and in the classrooms. And so that's part of that coaching that new administrators need, is that know when to say, I'm not going to do this right now, I'll do it later. Right now, what's more important is I get out into that classroom, or I get out on the schoolyard during recess and talk to kids. And that's a hard thing for some people because those things still need to be taken care of.
Oh, Steve, I so agree with that, because early on, you want to have all the answers as a young principal and know that you know everything about everything, right? So you make that list. And then I think I mentioned the leadership team. It took me a semester or two to reach out. You have to know your people and develop that good team around you.
Mhm.
So they can take one or two of those. It's empowering your people. Here's one other thought I've had most recently. I've come to believe that some principals, and especially younger principals, don't get into this work. I'm going to go watch teachers teach them. I'm going to look at their data, right? And then if it's not good, I've got to work with that teacher and support him to find new instructional strength. That is difficult work. I think some young principals are fearful of that work. So it's easier to stay trapped in my office and just stay busy on all of these system things, when we all know then we've totally missed the boat. A real leader is going to take that learning and be vulnerable with staff. I don't know what I'm doing exactly, but I just know, like for us in 7th grade, kids could not do slope in math. I don't know what, I didn't know how to do slope either. They taught me, the teachers did, as we did, but we worked on slope for way too many semesters till we figured it out. But the principal is right in alongside teachers when they struggle, helping them find solutions. But I think some principals get scared of that work, and it's the exact work where we need them most.
As Rhonda says, conflict resolution is part of the job of principal, and it's something many new to the role of principal avoid. So use your data and have genuine dialogues. And if you make a mistake, and you will make mistakes, believe me, acknowledge it, apologize, and work to improve yourself. Find out more about our work with restorative practices and relational ways to resolve conflict at www.restorative.ca. You can send me an email, stan@restorative.ca. Well, there's a whole lot more to come in part 2, so stay tuned.